You tell yourself she's just tired, just emotional, just stressed. You tell yourself this as you hand her your silence, your wallet, your time, your back. And then one day, you catch yourself apologizing for being exhausted. And she doesn't say, "It's okay." She says, "You're always so dramatic." You look at the clock. It's midnight. You worked 10 hours today. And somehow, you're still the problem. But you don't speak up. Because somewhere along the line, you learned that being a man means absorbing. Absorbing her moods. Absorbing her criticism. Absorbing the guilt she doesn't even have to say out loud anymore. Let me ask you something. What if she's not ungrateful? What if she's strategic? What if her silence isn't sadness? It's punishment. What if her honesty isn't feedback? It's erosion. What if her love isn't love, but a leash you were trained to call devotion? And worst of all, what if you're not being strong by staying? What if you're just easier to control when you think your pain is noble? You're not broken because of what she did. You're broken because you kept calling it love when your soul was screaming, "Get out." But no one taught you how to listen to that voice. They only taught you how to shut it up. So here you are, tired, trained, useful. And that's what she wanted all along. Not a man, a machine. One that fixes things, funds comfort, and never malfunctions emotionally. You don't need another pep talk. You don't need more advice. What you need is a mirror, held up so close it hurts. And if you stay with me till the end of this video, I'm going to show you something they've worked very hard to keep from you. The truth about the system that built her, and the one that broke you. Not just how to survive it, but how to finally walk away from it. Unbroken, unowned, and free. He doesn't slam doors. He doesn't scream. He doesn't throw things. He just stops speaking. And the world applauds. They say, he's mature, he's composed, he's stable. But what if that silence isn't peace? What if that silence is a man bleeding inwardly because no one gave him the space to bleed outward? Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." But no one tells men how lonely that selfhood becomes when even your suffering is seen as a threat to her comfort. You want to scream, but you've been trained to compress, to be low maintenance, to be the rock, even when you're drowning. Carl Jung warned us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But how can a man accept himself in a culture that only accepts his usefulness? You think you're strong because you endure. But Epictetus, the Stoic, would ask, do you endure out of virtue, or because you fear consequence? Because there's a difference between being stoic and being silenced. There's a difference between calmness and emotional imprisonment. The world lets her cry, rage, collapse. They call it expression. But when you do the same, they call it aggression, or worse, weakness. So you tighten your jaw. You go to work. You keep your head down. And you start disappearing, piece by piece, hour by hour, until the only thing left is a functioning machine with a man-shaped shadow inside it. And when you finally collapse, not loudly, but quietly, no one notices, because you taught them not to. You trained them to ignore your pain by always smiling through it. This isn't strength. This is exile. And if you're still telling yourself that she didn't mean to use you, ask yourself this. Why does she only love the version of you that never interrupts her comfort? That's not love. That's selective empathy. And it will erase you as gently as a wave removes footprints from the shore. But stay with me, because in the next part, we're going to expose how a man's devotion is weaponized against him, and how the very things he's praised for are the tools of his own undoing. They told you love is sacrifice, so you sacrificed time, energy, ambition, sleep, health, pride. You gave until it hurt, and then you gave some more. Because somewhere along the way, you were told that's what makes you a real man, a protector, a provider, a quiet storm. And at first, she called it admirable. She praised your strength. She told her friends, "He's always there for me. He never complains." But slowly, subtly, your devotion became expectation, and then obligation. And now, deviation is betrayal. Needing rest is selfish. Asking for space is emotional neglect. You didn't sign up for a relationship. You signed up for a contract, an invisible one, written in guilt, signed in exhaustion. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "If you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company." But what if you're lonely even when you're with her? What does that make you? Used. Not loved, just useful. You became a utility, a steady source of affirmation, income, validation, not because she loves who you are, but because she loves how you function. And now, when you express a need, she calls it drama. When you draw a boundary, she calls it cruelty. When you try to step back, she calls it abandonment. She weaponizes your compassion. She twists your kindness into compliance. And the more loyal you are, the less human you become. This isn't romance. This is conditioning. And it works so well because you still think the pain means you're doing something right. But pain is not proof of love. Pain is often proof of manipulation. And if you're still unsure, ask yourself one question. Would she still love you if you stopped performing, stopped giving, stopped folding to make her comfortable? If the answer is no, then my friend, you are not in love. You are in emotional servitude. But we're not done. In the next part, we go deeper into the cultural machinery that taught her to expect your suffering as her birthright. She wasn't born entitled. She was trained. Trained by Disney, by daytime talk shows, by college classrooms, by influencers with sad eyes and sharp claws. Trained to believe that her emotions are always valid, her pain is always louder, and her mistakes are always someone else's fault, usually yours. You think she's being cruel? She thinks she's being brave. Because this culture told her, if you say no to her moods, you're emotionally unavailable. If you want peace, you're controlling. If you finally walk away, you're abusive. And don't you dare speak up. Because if a man says, I'm hurting, the world says, what did you do to her? Christina Hoff. Sommers warned us. We have raised a generation of women who believe that being offended is a sign of moral superiority. So she doesn't want equality. She wants immunity. She doesn't want a partner. She wants a man who will bleed beautifully and never ask why. And here's the genius of it. When she weaponizes victimhood, you feel guilty even asking for fairness. Because they've redefined masculinity as endless patience and redefined femininity as untouchable fragility. And now you're stuck. If you give less, you're cold. If you give more, you disappear. You're damned if you speak. You're damned if you stay quiet. So you tiptoe through your own life. Careful, soft-spoken, numb. And she calls this love. But it's not love. It's emotional colonization. You are her territory. Your mind, your time, your silence, occupied. And the worst part? You still think you're lucky to have her. But don't hate her. This isn't all her fault. She was handed a script, just like you were handed one, be useful or be alone. Both of you were lied to, but only one of you is paying the full price for the lie. In the next part, we reveal how this lie evolved, from fairy tales to feminism to psychology, and how men became the acceptable casualties of emotional power. You thought therapy would help. You thought understanding emotions would free you. You thought if you just learned enough, fixed enough, gave enough, she'd finally see you. Instead, you learned how to blame yourself more eloquently. Modern psychology taught you how to speak her language, but never your own. It taught you about attachment styles, but not how love can be weaponized. It taught you about trauma responses, but not how guilt can be engineered. It taught you to reflect, to self-analyze, to hold space, but it never taught you how to say, "No more." Because here's what no one told you. Most psychological frameworks were designed in a culture that already believes male emotion is dangerous and female emotion is divine. So when she cries, you're told to validate. When she screams, you're told to understand. But when you go quiet, you're labeled withdrawn. When you finally snap, you're dangerous. The system is not neutral. It favors tears over silence. It favors expression over endurance. It favors performance over truth. Dr. Warren Farrell said it best. The weakness of men is the facade of strength. The strength of women is the facade of weakness. So you sit in that therapist's office, and every question circles back to you. Why did you trigger her? Why don't you express more? Why are you afraid of intimacy? But no one asks, why does she get to weaponize vulnerability? Why is your exhaustion a red flag, but her emotional chaos a love language? Even in healing spaces, you are expected to serve the story of her pain, while yours remains footnotes in your own biography. This isn't healing. It's psychological gaslighting, with a certification on the wall. And the more aware you become, the easier it is for her to frame your boundaries as abuse and your fatigue as failure. But stay with me, because in the next part, we stop apologizing, we stop diagnosing, and we start exposing the myth of the emotionally unavailable man and how it was used to erase everything you carried in silence. They say you're emotionally unavailable, that you're distant, detached, cold, but they don't ask why. Because if they did, they'd have to confront the truth. You're not cold. You're just done performing. Done pretending you're okay with being touched only when it's convenient. With being heard only when it flatters her. with being loved only when you're useful. You've stopped playing the part, the emotionally generous man, the tireless listener, the therapist with benefits, the walking apology. You're not unavailable. You're unfucking willing to be extracted from anymore. And that scares them, because the man who refuses to perform can no longer be manipulated. The man who doesn't chase can't be baited. The man who no longer fears loneliness is finally ready to meet truth. She says, "You're so different now." No, you're just finally whole. And whole men don't bend for attention. They don't fold under guilt. They don't offer their peace as a gift to someone who breaks it for fun. You've seen what love looks like when it's a performance. You've learned the rhythm of fake healing, of conditional affection, of crisis-based closeness. And you're done, because the real you doesn't beg to be held. The real you doesn't explain his exhaustion to people who benefit from his silence. The real you knows that strength isn't loud, but it is final. So now, when she asks, "Why are you so quiet?" you smile and say, "Because I'm finally listening to me." And here's the twist they never saw coming. You still believe in love. You just don't believe in surrendering yourself to be eligible for it. In the next part, we show how this quiet rebellion, this refusal to beg, is the exact moment you begin reclaiming your masculinity. Not toxic, not fragile, just untamed. He used to fall for softness, for the trembling voice, for the tears that came at just the right moment. He used to confuse brokenness for depth, chaos for passion, neediness for connection. He thought, if she needs me, maybe I'm worth something. But now, he sees clearly. He doesn't need to be needed anymore. He needs to be met, not worshipped, not feared, not followed. Met by someone who doesn't flinch at his silence, who doesn't twist his boundaries into rejection, who doesn't confuse his clarity with cruelty. And that eliminates most women, because most were taught how to extract, not how to stand. They were raised to receive, but not to recognize. So when they meet a man who isn't chasing, they panic, they poke, they provoke. Because if he's not begging to be chosen, what power do they have? But he doesn't flinch. He doesn't argue. He doesn't explain. Because he's not performing for attention anymore. He's protecting something sacred, his peace. And the only kind of woman he'll ever let near it again is one who understands that his silence is earned, not empty. That his solitude isn't loneliness, it's alignment. That his standards are not too much. They are the result of walking through emotional war and refusing to ever go back. He is not interested in proving his worth. He already knows it. He's not interested in saving anyone. He knows the price. He's no longer auditioning. He's building. And if she cannot stand beside that, she cannot stand beside him at all. This is the man who's no longer afraid to walk alone. In the next part, we reveal how women respond to this kind of man, and why most confuse his strength with danger, because they've never met a man they couldn't manipulate. She used to say, "You've changed." But what she really means is, "You stopped letting me shape you." She says, "You're intimidating." But what she means is, "You don't need me to feel whole anymore." She says, "You're emotionally unavailable." But what she means is, "You stopped performing for my comfort." And now, she's afraid. Not because you're aggressive, but because you're stable. Not because you're toxic, but because you're untouchable. You don't flinch at tears. You don't chase when she pulls away. You don't explain yourself every time she feels uneasy. You've become immune to the tactics that once owned you. The gaslighting, the guilt, the crisis bonding, the silent treatment. They bounce off you now because you've buried the version of yourself who used to crave chaos just to feel close. That man is gone, and what's left terrifies her because she can't shape you. She can't decode you. She can't find the cracks to crawl into and conquer. You're not aggressive. You're just sovereign. And sovereignty always feels like threat to those who only understand love through control. She might call you cold, disconnected, heartless. But the truth is, you finally have a heart that doesn't beg to be held by someone who doesn't know how to hold herself. And here's the irony. For the first time in your life, you're actually capable of love, real love, without dependency, without self-erasure, without illusion. But most won't recognize it, because they've only known men who collapse to be kept. And you don't collapse anymore. You build, you stand, you choose. In the next part, we'll talk about that rare woman, the one who doesn't want to rule you, rescue you, or ruin you. She just wants to walk beside you. But before she appears, you had to become this. She doesn't ask what you earn. She asks what you've endured. She doesn't ask who you are to the world. She asks who you became when the world stopped clapping. She doesn't flirt through neediness. She doesn't seduce with chaos. She doesn't test your love by breaking your peace, because she's met herself in fire, in solitude, in silence. She didn't wait to be rescued. She built the ladder. She didn't demand healing from others. She stitched her own wounds. And now, she doesn't want a fixer. She wants a mirror. Someone who won't collapse under her storms, but also won't stay quiet when she self-destructs. She wants a man who can see her power and not shrink, who can witness her softness and not exploit it. And when she meets you, you, who have already buried the boy, who no longer bends for approval, who has traded addiction to affection for allegiance to truth. She doesn't try to own you. She tries to meet you, not above, not below, beside. No scripts, no manipulation, no performance, just presence. And for the first time in your life, you realize love doesn't have to hurt to feel real. It doesn't have to consume. It doesn't have to confuse. It doesn't have to test your breaking point to prove it's deep. It can be clear. It can be calm. It can be chosen. But she only showed up after you let go of needing someone to save you. Because real women don't come to fix broken boys. They come to build with men who already fixed themselves. In the final part, we bring it full circle. Not just about relationships, not about gender, but about the one thing most men never dare to ask. What would my life look like if I stopped betraying myself forever? You were never meant to carry her wounds. You were never meant to absorb her storms. You were never meant to bleed just to keep the peace. But you did, because you were taught that love means saving, that manhood means sacrifice, that loyalty means silence. And it broke you. But here's the truth they never dared to say. You weren't built to serve a love that demands your disappearance. You weren't built to shrink for harmony, to bend for validation, to ache beautifully for someone else's comfort. That's not love. That's slow self-erasure. You call it devotion, but it's just betrayal of the only man who was ever going to stay with you till the end. You wanted to be chosen. You wanted to be enough. But somewhere deep down, you knew the truth. You were never going to be chosen until you chose yourself. Not in theory, not in words, but in the brutal, daily, unspectacular act of refusing to abandon yourself. Again. No more dimming your fire because her shadows feel insecure. No more explaining your peace to people addicted to chaos. No more folding your voice so others can stay comfortable in their illusions. You're not cold. You're not cruel. You're just finally loyal to the one person who got buried under all the performance. You. You don't need applause. You don't need understanding. You just need to never lie to yourself again. That is what it means to be a man, not a savior, not a servant, but a sovereign. So let them misunderstand you. Let them mislabel you. Let them miss you. Because the man you used to be is dead. And the one standing now, he doesn't beg. He doesn't break. He doesn't betray himself. He builds. He breathes. He becomes. Welcome back.